Test one, two, three. Good morning. Happy Saturday. Friends, growers, I spent a lot of time on this video the last couple of hours and then last night just to make sure that I didn't have a repeat of last week. So the fact that everything's working now, let me know in the chats. I got everything pulled up. This is already feeling better. It's looking better. Let me know what your experience is because like I said last week, I go back and read all the chats after they get done processing, and then I can improve the next week. But since we spent some time together last Saturday, there's been a lot of updates, a lot of changes. I'm really excited. I have to cognizantly slow myself down, otherwise, I know myself, I'll just start like running through all this stuff, all the updates, all the changes, all the good stuff that's happened in just the last 6, 7 days. So that's good. Good sound. We're on a good, off to a good start. So before I get into all the updates from this past week, I would love to just say hi to everybody that's tuned in so far. So we got the J Bot from up in Ontario. Hello to you. Michael, who is now, I don't know, I'm really curious. Have you always been known as the White Beard of the South? Because I love that nickname. That's something that's developed in the last couple of weeks. I'm now the Ginger Beard. But Michael, nice to see you here today. And then I'm not sure if she's signed into her Google account, but I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my own mother, 'cause I know she's joining us today. So, hello, Mom, out in Washington State. Thanks for joining me today on this live stream. This is this is going to be lots of updates. So, I first, and as people come in, I'll acknowledge you when I see up on the chat. So, I don't want to miss anybody today. I did mention last week that I really appreciate you struggling or sticking with me if you've been here since I think February is when I started these live streams, and I've done a lot of improvements. It's just been getting reps in so I can get to a more polished live stream show on Saturday mornings. Saturday mornings are a good time for me. It's not too early, not too late. I have a routine, so I'm not sure like what your daily routine is if you try to stick to a routine every day, but I try to stick to a routine daily. Sometimes that will get thrown out the window because life happens, right? But I typically try to go to bed at 10 o'clock every night, and then I wake up at 5. So if that sounds really early, um, that's when I get up 5 a.m. And then I usually work out or some type of exercise, or sometimes I'll just go for like a long walk. We live out in the country, so we're exactly 3/4 of a mile down gravel from where the acreage is out to the blacktop. So I'll just walk down there and then walk back. But when I come back after whatever exercise I'm doing for the morning, I'll already have coffee made, and then I like to do some learning or some type of reading. So you can see behind me all these the horticulture books behind me. I'll usually try to read a chapter or something, or I'll pull up YouTube videos. I mean, it's crazy how far YouTube has come in the last even 10 years. But I remember in its infancy in the early 2000s, it was nothing like it is today. So uh, that's one of the good parts about YouTube is that there's this massive wealth of information and knowledge. I will put a caveat on that. There's a reason why I was naturally led into horticulture, going to school. I mentioned briefly last week about going to Oregon State University, and I got my cup here again with some tea. So that's my Oregon State plug. But the vast amount of knowledge on YouTube can be a double-edged sword. There's some very good information, and then there's also information that I wouldn't say is bad. It just may not be factually correct. So that was one of the big drivers behind me going back to or going to Oregon State to go through a horticulture program. So I wanted to start off with that because that's one of the updates from this past week. I don't know if Caitlin's going to be joining us today, but I gave her a shout out last weekend. She's a horticulture therapist, and the further I get into the horticulture therapy world, the more communication, the more chats, conversations I've had with registered horticulture therapists. So the whole field is fascinating. The more I learn, the more I'm intrigued and I have more questions. Right now, I have a lot more questions than answers. Some of the answers I have I've gotten from the senior living sessions I've been running over the last 5 months now. And it's just this amazing world that this time last year I had no idea about. So one of the updates from this past week is I got to talk to one of the experts in the horticulture therapy world, and I hope to bring her onto this live stream in the future because I think you would enjoy hearing uh, the registered horticulture therapist part of it and getting like the really in depth of how horticulture therapy plays into the world of therapy in large. So, as I understand it, and I'm sure I'm gonna probably explain this different in the future, but the horticulture therapy, the discipline of horticulture therapy, is in the same world as or universe as like occupational therapy, speech language pathology, maybe even like some other types of therapies like physical therapy, but it doesn't have the same weight. So that's interesting. That's something I learned this last week. And uh, the association that kind of governs the horticulture therapist world, they're kind of redesigning or modifying how the certification process goes for therapists to give them more equal standing with like your OTs and SLPs in the world. It's interesting, and I just learned this last week that those other disciplines of profession, the the American Horticulture Therapy Association, they are redesigning how the credentialing goes. So they're actually coming out with a board certified therapeutic horticulture program. And one of the changes that's happened in the last 7 days is after I had the telephone call um, with one of the experts in the field, and I said I won't give it away. I'm hoping to get her on here in the near future. So I'll keep her identity concealed for now. But that led me naturally back to Oregon State University. So I reached out to my academic advisor in horticulture, and I was asking about the certification process for therapeutic horticulture or horticulture therapy. It is kind of interesting. There's a nuance between horticulture therapy and therapeutic horticulture. So that's interesting because depending on how you use those two words, there's different credentialing that is attached to those. So the registered horticulture therapist, those are the ones that have gone through all the rigorous academic work. They've gone through the most internship or the job shadowing, and then that's the highest level. So what's going to be happening here is that registered horticulture therapist is actually going to be, after this new credentialing, is going to be like a board certified position. So it's going to be very similar to like other board certified professions that you think about, like doctors, lawyers, that type of thing. So that's really fascinating. But this last week, I reached out to my academic advisor at Oregon State University to see if Oregon State has a certification program, and they do. So I filled out the 2-page application. I meet with a advisor here this next week, and it's looking like this fall. So actually, next month already, I'm going to be re-entering college to work on the certification process for horticulture therapy, which is super exciting because I was just introduced to this whole world maybe 5, 6 years ago. It was when I was working on my core horticulture classes. I think it's an intro to horticulture. That's where I got exposed to the horticulture therapy term. It wasn't very in depth. It's just enough to where we were exposed to like here's like a subset profession of horticulture that's real. There's a real value to it, and there's real work that's being done in medical facilities for one, like hospitals, but also other domains inside the horticulture world and the medical world. So it's really exciting. And I may definitely be keeping you updated on these Saturday live streams as I start to go through the horticulture therapy um, credentialing. So just the baseline or the entry level is a horticulture therapy practitioner. So that's the first level I'm going to be going for. It's I think 13, 14 quarter credits that I need. So that's the equivalent to the semester credits. And then there's some other requirements that go with that too. But yeah, this is gonna be pretty exciting. I see we got some more people in the chat here. So Howie from Food Forest Permaculture, nice to see you here today. And anyway, so that's one of the big things this week that happened is just within 7 days, had a very good conversation with a professional in the industry, and this led me right back to college to start getting some more uh, education, formal education under my belt in the horticulture therapy world. And Oregon State is not paying me to plug this, but it's a great college, so I will say that. Okay, so I see Jay asked question: is it online school, in person, part time, full time? Do you need pencils? Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't think I talked a lot about this last weekend. Maybe I did, but one thing that drew me immediately to Oregon State University is that they have a massive, what they call e-campus or an online campus. I've seen that a lot of colleges here in the United States, I have a feeling Canada probably has something equivalent. They've gone more online, and especially during the COVID 2020 era, uh, they were, you know, lots of businesses and schools in particular had to kind of rethink about how they deliver courses. And one of the immediate benefits that I saw of Oregon State was that they had a massive library of online courses. It was also one of the very few colleges in the United States that had a horticulture, or for that matter, any agriculture science that was completely online. So that was a natural benefit for me, direct benefit, because at the time I had a full-time day job. And I'll drop this little bit of trivia about me. I kind of just give you a little bit more every weekend so you get to know more behind me because it's kind of like lasagna. There's just like multiple layers to this. I originally went to school for automotive technology. So I have a degree in, I think, is applied science in automotive technology. So that's what I wanted to do since I was a little kid, is go wrench on cars. And I fulfilled that dream for about 5 years professionally. But when I entered that field in 2006, and then when we got to 2008, 2009, that Great Recession, that's not talked about much today. That was a brutal time in that industry because you may or may not be aware of this, that if you take your car to an auto shop to get repaired, those mechanics, technicians that you see, most of them are getting paid a commission or a flat rate. And it's a brutal industry when we go through a massive recession because if you're not wrenching on cars as a technician, you're not getting paid. So I had wild swings from where I was making like really good paychecks a week to minimum wage the next week. And then it just flip flop cycle, and it was brutal, especially since we had a young family. Um, but that was my original schooling, was a 2-year vocational degree, automotive technology. I do not regret that because that led me to other career steps in the world of repairing machinery. I had 6 years in the railroad. 3 of those were working in a diesel shop, working on choo-choos. And then after that, most recently, I worked in the automated car wash industry for 10 years. So if you ever take your automobile or your car through an automated car wash or even a self-serve car wash where you drop the quarters in and you take a wand and spray your car down, that's what I was working on for the last decade. So back to the Oregon State, when I started getting really interested in horticulture and plants and growing, I was looking for a horticulture program to where I could do part-time school but still have a full-time job. And Oregon State was the answer to that because, like I said, they had a horticulture degree online, and it was at your own pace. So I don't have to be available at 10 a.m. on a Thursday for a professor to start talking. It's all pre-recorded. They do have hard deadlines for when assignments are due. So every week you have your syllabus of what needs to be done. But man, talk about flexibility and working around like adults, adults' lives where they have responsibilities or careers or whatnot. It's a fantastic program. So, Jay, that was a very long explanation for that, but it's all online. It's going to be part time. I'm gonna Right now. It might change after I talk to my academic advisor next week, but I plan to do what I've always done with my horticulture uh, undergraduate degree. Was just chip at it, a couple classes per quarter, so maybe 6 credits, a couple classes, and then continue to do what I'm doing. But the difference this time, which I absolutely love, is that I have a parallel pack or a parallel path. So I got the education and then I got the practical experience of what my nursery business is doing within the field that I'm pursuing. So I'm already getting like the real street experience from doing these workshop sessions with senior living communities, and then I'm going to be getting the formal education that goes with it. So it's going to be exciting, and I very much intend to share this journey with you all as we go through it. So yeah, uh, I'll say one last thing about Oregon State for today. They have to get really creative on how they deliver some classes. So for instance, soil science, which involves digging in the soil. They send a kit to my house or to the student's house, and it's all the stuff that you need for that term. So, if I remember correctly, I had different types of soils that were shipped to me because you're learning about different types of soils in different geographic locations. So, that was pretty cool because I get to see the type of soil that might be in Ontario or maybe on a coastal state where you have more sand content in that soil. We had a scale because we did different experiments with that. There was a sponge in there because we talked about some chemistry applications about how water flows through soil. I briefly mentioned this a few weekends ago about water, the adhesion and cohesion properties of how water moves through plants, and I don't know. I've just been very happy with how Oregon State has set up and delivered their programs. They've done really good work. So that's that. That happened here this last 7 days. For this past week here at the nursery, I wanted to share something very interesting because I I have been talking about this season, and I've been growing long enough to where I anticipate different pests and diseases. So I know they're going to show up. I don't know when they're going to show up exactly to the date and the hour, but I do know that they're coming. And this week we had a couple pests show up. So I wasn't surprised when they show up, but I did do something. I hope you enjoy this. If you didn't see the short video that I did earlier this week, I was just going to say enjoy because this is how I dealt with one of my pests, and that was a squash vine borer. So I'm queuing this up so you can see this video.
Nice zucchini plant. Wait a second. Squash vine borers. Gotta remove it. Roots look good. Into the burn barrel.
Right now, if you're thinking this is absurd, you're right.
Anyway, gardening is therapeutic.
That's right. Gardening is therapeutic. So a lot of these shorts that I've been shooting and publishing on YouTube, sometimes when I'm out in the garden, like scouting in the morning, like I was talking about my routines, usually after I have coffee and like do some type of reading or whatnot, right after that is when I start doing the scouting out in the nursery. So I have different locations around the property with different types of plants. So I have a hoop house. I've shown that to you guys before. I have a shop. I don't think I've shown that, but I will at some point. I got plants in the basement. That's off right now because everything's outside or in the shop. And then I have some plants that are outside by our old barn that get wet eastern exposure. So they get the early morning sun and they get shade in the afternoon. That area over there is where I had an issue with the squash vine borer. And I don't have a lot of plants over there that they can, well, that are their natural plants that they go after. That was a zucchini plant. That was a zucchini plant that I brought back from one of my uh, gardens that I have at a customer's location, client. So I have a feeling that that plant was probably attacked at that location. I don't know for sure because I went back and inspected their plants. I didn't see any other issues at the time. It could be out here at the acreage. But what I am curious is, have you had issues with squash vine borers, and how did you handle them? And did you happen to burn their carcasses and make s'mores right after? Hey, Shawnee Grows is here. Nice to see you. Yeah, so anyway, when I'm doing the scouting in the morning, uh, that's stuff I'm looking for. So known pests and disease that I've had in the past. And like I said, this is the first year that I've had squash vine borer anywhere. I've been growing plants at customers' homes since 2020 when I started the business, and I'm used to certain diseases. But this is the first time that I've seen squash vine borers on any of the plants. And there's a zucchini plant that got hit. I only do one zucchini. It's called Astia. I think I've talked about that in the past. It's a workhorse plant, but this is the first year that squash vine borers. So I'm not, I'm not really sure since this is the first year since 2020 that I've seen this. I'm not sure if we're getting increased pressure from squash vine borers in this geographic location. This could just be an anomaly. I'm saying that because you've probably seen this in your own gardens where different weather patterns, different winter weather patterns will affect the next growing season. So some years I have a really bad like aphid pressure. Some years I have a really bad thrip pressure, and usually that's directly tied to climate cycles. So the year that I had thrip pressure, we had really dry, hot days in a row. So many successive hot and dry, they were able to get a foothold and then multiply very quickly. This year, it's been more humid. We have had heat, but it hasn't been like hot and dry like we did that year that I had thrip pressure. So even when we started in July this year, I wasn't really concerned about thrips. But if we start having like successive 90-degree days with a really dry, low humidity, I'd expect more pressure from my favorite grasshoppers because they multiply fast, and then thrips, just to give you examples. So in your own gardening, if you've had pests that just showed up one year, or maybe this year you've had an issue with squash vine borers, I wouldn't get totally discouraged. Don't freak out. I gave you an option of what you could do. You could actually like have a little fire and roast some s'mores off their burning carcasses, which I strongly encourage because there's therapeutic value just in that. uh, but just don't get discouraged. If you got a pest that seems to just grinding your gears, it's okay because next year might be a completely different experience. It might be its cousin that shows up that's gonna start doing that, but that's part of growing and part of learning is just adapting. I've said this before too, is that when I do my scouting in the morning, I try, and it doesn't always happen like this, but I try to catch problems as early as possible. So I did have an issue earlier this year with aphids in the shop nursery, and that nursery is not open to the outdoors. And I found out what happened was some of the seedlings I was bringing back to the shop after I'd run a program or workshop, uh, I I accidentally picked up some aphids while I was moving plants around, and I introduced those to the nursery. So that was one very quick operational change. It's a one-way trip. So once seedlings leave my shop nursery, they don't come back to the shop nursery. It keeps that isolated, and then it prevents any problems from future introducing pests or maybe some diseases. Uh, Back to that zucchini plant. So that zucchini plant I brought back from a customer's garden because I swapped it out with another plant, and that's a quarantined area. So those plants don't go back into the hoop house or the basically the general population. They definitely won't go under a row cover with my other plants that have stayed under row covers just because they need to be isolated in case I bring back a pest or problem. Uh, Another disease, or not disease, but another pest I've had this year is Japanese beetles, and I don't think those came back with it in my plants. The big change this year is that I'm growing a lot more raspberries, a lot more strawberries. So I have a lot more plants on property here that the Japanese beetles just naturally want to go after. Um, I've been scouting and seeing those in the morning, but honestly, I think I've only squished like maybe 6 of them so far. So I don't have a large enough population to worry about. If I started going out like every morning and seeing a Japanese beetle or two chewing on raspberry or strawberry leaves, I'd probably get a little bit more concerned, and then I would start to formulate a game plan on how to reduce that pressure before we get to the fall, just because I don't want them to overwinter on the property. If they overwinter and they get established, it's going to be harder to prevent the next year cycle from blowing up and taking off. So I see there's some chats. I want to see what's going on here and see if there's any questions that I need to answer. Okay, Jay has a fantastic tip here. If you catch the squash vine borer early, you can do surgery and remove, cover with breathable bandage, and bury the stem. Yeah, I know that's a common technique. I appreciate that. And I would absolutely do that if I was in a raised bed or in the ground. But being in containers, and honestly, with that zucchini plant already. So, so just for the context, that plant had been out in my customer's garden for a month and a half, I think, and they've already been harvesting uh, fruits off that plant. So those plants I usually bring back to the nursery if they're still healthy. If they're completely done, if they've gone through their life cycle and they've actually went on to plant heaven, I'll just throw them in the compost pile, and then they just go to the next year's potting soil. But with the plants that are past their prime, I'll bring them back to our acreage, our plant nursery, and then they go into that quarantine area. And as long as they don't have any big problems, I'll continue to nurture them, water them, give them what they need, and then that's what our family eats off of. So that was one of those plants, and it was just funny because the day that I was scouting that and I saw that they'd already been munched on, that wasn't one of those plants that I was like aggressively and like really looking at scouting, because my attention has to go to the plants that I'm still developing for programs or for my customer gardens. That's priority number one. Is I have to make sure I have a healthy supply of plants that are feeding the distribution chain. I guess I could say. So that one I wasn't too heartbroken about. It's just the idea popped in my head, like I can make a really cool video if I just went completely absurd on this. And then the s'mores idea came in my head. But yeah, so the burying the vine, that's fantastic tip. What else do we have on there? Michael says they are just awful. Is that the squash vine borers that are awful down there, or the Japanese beetles? Okay, Shawnee Gross mentioned Minnesota is possibly working on a program for gardeners to introduce the wasp that lays eggs on the Japanese beetles. Then, when they hatch, they eat the beetles to control the population. I haven't heard anything about that. I'm actually kind of surprised I haven't heard anything about that. I get frequent emails from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture on updates for like regulations or stuff that I need to know as a nursery operator. Curious to know where you heard that. I'm sure they are talking about it, because that's one thing I see every year on the gardening groups and pages on Facebook, is just local gardeners talking about Japanese beetles wiping out all their favorite plants. Typically see those raspberries, strawberries, grapes, rose bushes. Actually, it's quite an extensive list. They're really not too picky. Uh, they don't go after my squash plants though. So yeah, I'm sure they are talking about it. But okay, so that was one thing that showed up this week or this past week. The next thing is, I had mentioned this on a couple of live streams that I follow and I watched this past week, is our special guest of honor showed up this week too, powdery mildew. So yes, I'm curious. Let me know. Have you seen any powdery mildew in your garden this year so far? And I'd really be interested is, when do you typically see it? So I typically see it this time of year, so I'm not surprised it's here. Powdery mildew is a fungi. I read out of the textbook right on my shoulder here a few weeks ago about how this operates, and the the pressure of that fungi in the plant is just amazing. It's like got like a death grip on the foliage of that plant. So once it gets established, it's very hard uh, to keep on it. But again, I'm not worried because this is early. So this is what the type of stuff I scout for in the morning. And honestly, I'm not even concerned about this plant that you see the powdery mildew on, is because I strategically have plants at different parts of the property. So these plants are outside. I'm not sure if you could use this at where you're at. You could kind of modify my technique, but it's something I want to share with you because I use this plant right here as my canary in the coal mine. So it's outside, it's in the elements, it's not protected overhead, it's not under a row cover or anything like that. I have a lot more squash, melons, cucumbers in my greenhouse. They're more protected because we got that plastic film on the hoop house. Uh, it's just harder for the the airborne spores to get into that tunnel. They will get in there, but because my canary in the coal mine, the picture here that you see has tipped me off that it's alive and well. Now I could start taking my more aggressive measures. Oh yeah. So as Shawnee said, we have like 60 days left for warm crops. Yeah, that's something else that I'm just not really. I don't get too bent out of shape about these type of problems this time of year because we're losing light here in Minnesota, so the days are getting shorter. We still have warm weather, but something else I want to mention too is when we talk about like diseases on plants, there's the disease triangle. I mentioned it before. I'll mention it again because it's a super important point. Uh, that it's just like other things that require three to make something happen. For the disease triangle, you need to have the right environmental conditions. So here recently, it's like perfect conditions for powdery mildew to start to take off and uh, spread and reproduce. Because our daytime highs have been like low to mid 80s, and then the overnight lows are in the low 60s. So that's a perfect range, that temperature range right there for this fungi to start reproducing. Uh, it has been a little bit humid. That kind of varies day by day, depending on if we have a thunderstorm that rolls through or whatnot. But the temperature's right there, and the overall conditions, it's like perfect for this fungi to start multiplying. So that's one part of the triangle. The other part of the triangle is the disease or the inoculum. That's another fancy word you can use. You can impress your dinner guests while you're serving edible flowers on the salad. But we need to have the disease. So this picture here, we're talking about the powdery mildew, but that could be like an angular spot on a cucumber plant, which I did see that here recently. And even that, I wasn't really surprised. I'm not freaked out. I'm not concerned. It's okay. We'll get past it. But those are two examples of an inoculum or a disease. So that's the second leg of the triangle. And then the third leg of the triangle is a susceptible host. So this plant right here is one of my baby butternut squash plants. And I showed the leaf, but like I said, I'm not too concerned because this plant, I'll bring the squash in, but the fruits are already like, they're pretty much to the mature size. So they've been growing very like a big fat baby over the last couple of months with the warmer uh, summer-like temperatures. So even if this even if I let nature take over, this plant was done here in a couple weeks. It's fine. I got enough fruit off of it to where I have enough material because After all that plant, I'm growing it to get the baby squash to take to these workshops I'm doing. So, um, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm just gonna let this go natural. I'm actually taking steps right now to prevent the spread of that. And I definitely started taking steps in the hoop house and other locations around the property just to make sure that this doesn't get out of control. Because the reality is, it's here. I knew it was going to come. It's here. Now I got to take the steps to make sure it doesn't spread to all my other plants that I don't want to be nailed yet. And one of those plants, I did a short about it here recently, but it's my Moon and Stars watermelon plant. So I got a, I got a watermelon on that plant right now. The plant's looking great. Um, I want that thing to get to the harvest size, so that plant got moved immediately to a more secluded area that's going to be less prone to fungal spores floating around there. Oh, Shawnee Grows has a fantastic question, and I want to address this. Do you compost your powdery mildew plants or burn them? I burn them. That burn barrel that I had in my little video that I did for the squash vine board, that's what I use. So you probably saw it too. There's a brush pile off to the side. So it's around the acreage. We have like no shortage of brush and wood. So I always got free wood on the property to start a little fire and make some s'mores. Or just have a nice little burn barrel on a Friday, Saturday night. And so I'll just get the fire rolling and throw the whatever diseased foliage in there, but it doesn't go in my compost pile at all. It stays out of there. Okay, I knew this was coming too. What steps do I take for powdery mildew? So the first thing uh, that I do, I think I mentioned this earlier this year because I was asked like, what do I do in response to powdery mildew? The copper fungicide comes out, and I'm going to just give you a little bit of background on this too. I use organic practices as I can. So I've been asked in the past about if my plants are organic certified, and I'm not going to be able to get them organic certified because I use synthetic fertilizers. I'm okay with that because I have a very specific way of growing and what I'm using these plants for. So I'll never be able to get most of my uh, edible plants organic certified just because the fact that I'm using the slow release fertilizer or synthetic fertilizer. That's okay. And years ago, when I started the company, I was using organic practices. I was really nervous about using any type of sprays, just because I think a lot of it was just knowledge that I didn't have. But as I progressed through horticulture programs and really understanding uh, what the benefits versus the trade-offs or the cons. So pros, cons. What I have here is I have a edible plant nursery that has an economic value. So I'm always cognizant of that. That is this something I can let or use just organic practices and I can contain it enough to where I can still get the economic value of this plant, or do I need to kind of like step up here and get a little bit more aggressive so I don't let this plant get out of control? So just to share some of the stuff that I use, and this is no endorsement of any of these products, but this is just stuff that I've used over the years that I've gotten really good results. So first one is the copper fungicide. That's what's going on these plants. Now, I don't just indiscriminately use copper fungicide. Um, that wouldn't be good stewardship of uh, that material. But I don't have a problem using it on these types of plants, my squash plants, because the reality is we're not going to be on this plant. I'm not going to be like eating those squash plants. I'm using it for the ornamental value, and as long as I'm washing, or if you use this material too, you're thoroughly washing the fruits on that, there's it's going to be okay. So I'm not going to use this material on like leafy greens or something that I'm going to be eating or I'm going to give to my family. It's only on this type of stuff where I'm using for the ornamental or the basically a tool for like a workshop. I'm getting at. So that's one material or use I have for the copper fungicide. Some other stuff I use is neem oil, and then I use BT, and then I use insecticidal soap. So insecticidal soap I used on the aphids when I had that breakout in the shop nursery this year. I would recommend using that if you have any aphid problems. If you don't have a lot of aphids, just spraying the aphids off the plants. Like out of all the pests and diseases, I would rather have aphids than any of the other pests that I've listed. Uh, because if you catch those early, you can easily spray them off the plant with a heavy stream of water. And it's funny because when I'm doing that, when I'm actually hosing them off the plants, I'm thinking of the videos that I've seen where like law enforcement uses crowd control with like a fire hose. That's what I kind of imagine I'm doing with the aphids. But anyway, copper fungicide. But before I even do the copper fungicide, I'm being very careful with what I'm touching. So I actually remove the leaves that have the evidence or the visual evidence of that those spores. So those get cut off immediately. They go to the burn barrel, they get burned, and then the rest of the plant gets treated with the copper fungicide. That's how I approach that. Yep. Yeah, you guys. I I like seeing what you guys are using too. That's why I'm looking at the comments real quick. Jay Jay says a fun game show for gardeners. Pick your pests. Yeah, we don't really pick them; they pick us, and then we choose how we're gonna deal with it. Um, but something I also do, I've experimented. I don't have as big a problem in my hoop house this year, but in past years, I've had a lot of grasshopper pressure. So somehow they figured out how to get into the hoop house. Just for clarification, my hoop house isn't open on the ends. I actually have it's screened, so they don't have easy access. The big difference this year is that I'm using a 30% shade cloth, and if you've used shade cloth, you'll know what I'm talking about. That's like another layer, a screen that's on top. So the larger grasshoppers now have a double layer, actually three layers really, to get through to get into that hoop house. I've had very few grasshoppers that figured out how to get in there this year. And honestly, they may have been in there like overwintered in there last year. I don't know for sure, but I haven't had a lot. In years past where I had grasshopper pressure that wanted to go after my pepper plants, those are usually the plants the grasshoppers liked. And it didn't really matter if it was like a bell pepper or a sweet pepper or a hot pepper. They were just going after that nice leaf, the nice green leaf of the pepper plant. The pepper plant was fine. It was still putting out good quality fruits, but it looked awful. And from my perspective, I have to have a plant that looks better than something that looks like Swiss cheese to sell to a customer. So what I did is I'd actually make my own homemade hot pepper sauce. So I'm curious to know if you've ever done anything like this. I ground up hot peppers, and I would recommend not doing this in the house because my family can attest. If you do this in the house, you have to wear a gas mask when you walk into the kitchen. But I use the coffee bean grinder to grind up the hotter peppers that I have, like scorpions or ghost peppers, and then I would just mix that into a spray bottle with water and then some soap, just some simple dish soap, and then I'd spray the plant with that, and that would help keep the grasshoppers off the leaves until I could actually grab them, squish them, or get them out of the hoop house. But yeah, so um, that's powdery mood. mildew. That's my powdery mildew story for the week. I have some other stories I want to share with you. So we have this one right here. I've talked about my coffee seeds, and I want to show you some photos over here. I got this up on the screen here also, but this is what I'm starting these in. And when I was prepping for the show, I want to tell you that I don't, I rarely follow the seed instructions. I did at the beginning, but I quickly realized with how I grow food or grow plants, like these grow bags over my shoulder, like just by just by having a commercial operation where I'm using grow bags, I'm already in like a different world than most growers, and that's fine. It's just I have a different method for starting seeds and growing. So this is what I used on my for my coffee seeds. So it's just a simple plastic snap lid container. I don't snap this down. I just leave the lid on like that, so it helps prevent the water from evaporating. But I just have a paper towel in there. It's room temperature, so right now it's 70 degrees in here, which is perfect temperature for these. But I have a couple pictures I want to show you of these coffee bean seeds up close because you probably can't see them right here. It's kind of exciting. That's why I want to share them with you guys. But this right here is what they look like. So I started these August 1st. So we're now 2 weeks into this experiment. And as I understand, this could take months for these seeds to properly germinate. And we've only been 2 weeks. What's nice about this experience is that I've had plenty of years growing carrots. And if you grow carrots, you can probably relate to this that carrots are trial in patience. Unlike radishes that seem to germinate as soon as you add water to them, carrots can take many weeks. And depending on the temperature, it could take even a little bit longer than that. But we're not even to the stage where carrots. I would start to expect carrots to be germinated. So, but what's really cool about this coffee germination adventure is this next photo I want to show you. That one right there. So that was today. I snapped this photo because I wanted to share this with you. I like that. Jay says Andy rebel with the trowel. That's right. That's right. Breaking the rules. uh, but I wanted to show you this picture because this was this morning. That looks like it's going to be the first coffee seed to pop, and this has been 2 weeks. So I did follow the seed company's recommendation. So for the first 48 hours, I actually did soak them in water. I did not completely submerge them in water, but I did have them sitting in enough water to where 50% of the seeds were actually in water to help loosen up that seed coat. But this right here makes me really happy because that looks like the radical that's starting to come up out of that seed. But I think this time next week when I share this again, that's going to be even further along. Some of the other seeds might look different too. Uh, but what's interesting is that that tan color on that coffee seed, that's what they all look like when I popped that seed packet open. And you can see that they're starting to turn color. I don't know if that's good or bad. I definitely didn't do anything with that. That's just the natural process as they've been imbibing or taking up water and starting the activation process. And if those terms I just threw out are new to you, that's in the horticultural world how we talk about the different stages of a seed coming back to life. And that's something else you can wow your dinner guests as you're serving some type of edible flower on a salad. I keep bringing it up because that's what I used to talk about at the farmers markets when I was trying to sell nasturtiums. Is this is the great edible flower to put on a garden? You can wow your dinner guests. I see Jay mentioned about the carrots. Jay's had good success or best success in recent years, germinating and growing by planting densely and watering twice daily. Yes, yes, water, water, water. I'm sure you know this, but if you didn't, after the activation stage starts, so that's after we start to hydrate the seed, it starts what's called the activation process, where it actively imbibes water. It starts waking up the seed. If at any point in the time after that, that seed dries out, it's not going to be coming back. It's done. It's rest in peace. It's going to plant heaven. Um, but yeah, a couple watering sessions per day. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yep, and that's the big thing is just uh, patience and then consistent watering with that plant uh, going forward. So yeah, something else I wanted to share with you all before we wrap up is I have two plants behind me, and they're gonna look very different. One looks really awesome, and the other one doesn't look as awesome. So let me switch back to this other camera. Okay, so this is my rosemary plant. It looks healthy. This is one of the plants I take with me when I'm doing workshops. So it's a great looking plant. Nice green foliage. This has been growing nice for the last couple of months, and it's gotten plenty of use. Lots of humans have been able to smell and interact with that plant, so that's good. This is a lavender plant. It doesn't look as good. This is something I want to share with you. Sometimes I share this at the workshops, depending on who I'm working with. Usually, assisted living, I'll give a lot more behind the scenes information if they're interested. Sometimes I get a lot of questions, and we just naturally lead into the really in-depth horticulture stuff. So that's exciting for me too. But I only start to talk about this type of stuff if there's interest from the audience or the participants. So this lavender plant right here, there's a couple things with this. I haven't published a video yet, but I did shoot some video footage of this plant, and this plant has three siblings. So that's one thing, if you didn't know, I wanted to let you know that when you go to a retail nursery store, and honestly, I hope they don't start coming after me for sharing this, but I I care about you and I want you to know this information. But when you buy your little pot in the spring at the your favorite box store or hopefully a local family-owned plant nursery, wherever it is, you get something like this, nice bushy, full-looking plant. Usually, if you buy flowers, the flowers are already opening. Looks really nice, compact. The plant nursery is doing a couple things. One, that plant that has the flowers open, if it's a flower, it was probably hit with artificial hormones uh, for a bunch of reasons to get it that nice, compact, dense look. But more importantly, with this lavender, because this lavender looks really rough. But again, I'm not concerned. This plant is actually going to be just fine, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But this plant right here actually had four plants in a container that was smaller than this. And that's something, if you didn't know, when you go to buy those plants in the spring, the first thing I would recommend doing is pulling the whole plant out of the pot. If you're used to just bringing it home and let it kind of acclimate to your location, I would at least eyeball the base of the plant where it's going into the potting soil and see how many plants you have. Because I can guarantee you have more than one plant that's planted in that pot. And that's not good for you being the end user of those plants because the more plants you have in there, the less nutrients and water you have for each plant. The more that plant's going to get set up to not have a great thriving life. So what happened with this one, and I intentionally let this thing grow out over a while because I wanted to demonstrate what happens if you get too many roots competing for too few nutrients and water. So when I pulled these four plants out of that container, you could see how they're all like kind of ingrown to each other. The roots were actually starting to die off. And that's why you see how this material or the foliage is all dried. And I've seen this multiple times. So if you ever see like down at the base of the soil, the foliage starts to die off, but the top of it still looks okay, you're basically losing uh, your plant from the roots up. So the plant below the soil it's not healthy. And what I did was I pulled all the plants out. I gently teased all the roots apart from each other, and then I repotted them. So I'm going to move this plant closer to the screen, and this is why I wanted to see what's going on. But if you look at the very base of here, like right there, those leaves right there, that's that's from the last couple weeks. And then you can't really see it. I'll take a couple of pictures next week, but there's actually healthy green foliage right down at the base of those stems. So if I didn't intervene when I did, that plant would most likely be in plant heaven. But I wanted to get that point just because I was going to be able to do some very good demonstration videos of what it looks like if you have too many plants competing for resources and they're just not playing nicely. You're going to lose all of them, and that's just the fact of how that works. And if this is new information to you on how the wholesale or retail plant nursery operates, then I'm glad you know a little bit more. You have a little bit more information going into next spring when you start seeing all those really fancy, beautiful, bushy looking plants. There were some levers that were pulled behind the curtain that you may or may not have been aware of to make them look that good. So, oh, Bowtie of Life's here. Nice to see you. Yeah. Okay. Couple last things I want to share with you, and then we're gonna wrap up. But this is more of the. I don't have the plant. I got the produce show and tell. So I'm curious, how many of you grow or have grown lemon cucumbers? They're one of my favorite heirloom cucumbers. So this is a smaller guy, but this is about when I like to pick them at that color. I try not to let them get to this point because usually if they get to this shade of yellow, the outside skin gets a little bit leathery. They're still good, but sometimes I'll just cut off the skin at that point. But this right here, I'm actually going to wash this and eat this here after I get up the live stream. But this is like the perfect color. And these lemon cucumbers, they're just a very cool, novel cucumber. I love have them as just snacking cucumbers, but I also like throwing them on sandwiches. So that's how I like to eat those. And then I also did a short earlier this week about this cucumber right here. I always like to grab the produce that looks interesting, like this one. So this is called a Tasty Green. It's a hybrid F1 English cucumber. So it shouldn't look like this. It should actually be a very long, thin cucumber. But this one, I almost missed it. It was growing like this, and it was growing around the inside of the grow bag. So it kind of right here where it's hooked, that's where it was growing around one of the 4-foot bamboo stakes I had in the container. So it just kind of and then following the container around the outside. I'm just reading a couple of the last comments here. Uh, Bowtie Life, Dave says we have garden guests coming today. I had to cut paths through the jungle out there. I hope you're gonna be sharing photos or videos. I want to see that. Shiny Grow says never grown lemon cucumbers. Yeah. So the last thing I'll share with the lemon cucumbers is my garden that I'm growing at the and occupational therapy SLP the clinic. I found this out earlier this year when I was meeting with the business owner that their kids that interact with that lemon cucumber plant, they go out there and just pick them and then they use these as fidgets, which I loved because that was a different different experience that I didn't anticipate with this plant right here is this is nature's fidget. So of course they would use it as a fidget. But anyway, so that's a lot that happened this last week, and yeah, I think it's a good time to wind the program down. I appreciate you joining me today, and the big news is I think Bowtie missed it, but I'm on my way back to college to dive deep into the horticulture therapy world, and this is gonna be exciting as the weeks go on, so I could share that journey with you all. But until then, I hope you have a fantastic week. I hope you don't experience any of the pests that I've experienced this week. But if you do, don't freak out. There are steps that you can do to take care of your plants and set them up to have a good end of their life. We are approaching the end of the summer growing season here in Minnesota, but we still honestly have a lot of growing time. And you can't see it, but I got spinach right behind the screen that I'm going to be starting here for the fall season. So we have quite a bit of growing season left here in Minnesota, even though the summer's slowly coming to an end. But anyway, have a great week. Look forward to seeing you next week. And here's another surprise for you too. I worked on the outro. So here we go.